Okay. Hello to both of you, and thank you so much for joining me today for the Global Health SIG's posters in a podcast. If you can just please take a bit of moment to introduce yourself. Maybe Tanya, you can start, and then
Sure.
Lori will follow.
Okay. Hi, I'm Tonya Miller. I am the program lead for the Doctor of Physical Therapy program at Harrisburg University, which is located in central Pennsylvania. We are a developing program, and our first student cohort was scheduled to start in January of 26.
Oh, wow. Congratulations,
Thank you. Well,
Lori.
Hello, I'm Dr. Lori Portzer. I'm the program lead for the exercise science program at Harrisburg University, and we are a brand new program. Our first cohort started fall of 2023.
Well, there's a lot that you guys are, there's it's an exciting program, looks like it. So my first question would be, what got you both interested in doing this study?
so I'll start at the way back beginning. This program actually has been going on for several years now. When I started, I moved from healthcare, home health and hospice, which has been the primary focus of my work. I've always been interested in being in the community and connecting to the community. And when I moved to the academic world, I wanted to engage students in the community, and I had some personal contacts at one of the facilities. Actually, both of the facilities that we've been at. So I knew the executive director at the one facility, and then I also had some connections to the other facility. So the first program wasn't actually research; it was more just student engagement and connecting students to to working with individuals experiencing homelessness. So we were able to start going there and doing an exercise program. And really, my interest is I read an article, and I'm totally having a mind blank right now on the author. I apologize, but it was really focusing on a study on the placebo effect, about telling people how active they were and how they actually found changes in their physiology based on just that person knowing that they were more active. So I started thinking about, like, what is that role of education around physical activity and empowering individuals to be more active, and is it them getting to understand that they are already active and that helps them to be more active? Or what is that actually underlying factor that creates that increase and that empowerment around physical activity? So that kind of spurred that question. Um, so the first project was a student program. We went in and we did the project, and it was really well received. There was really great engagement. The women really appreciated it. And then I was able to connect with Lori and another colleague, and we started to say, how do we look at this? And so, Lori, I'll let you jump in there, and you want to add more to how it evolved?
Yeah, it's been a beautiful evolution. I will say that. So I was just speaking with Tanya. We shared a wall in our office spaces. We continue to share a wall in our office spaces. But we were just chatting about what our interests are, what our research goals are, and just kind of how we first see ourselves in the community. And when Tanya had brought up the fact that she has this kind of, project going, I was very excited. I constantly look for ways to help decrease sedentary time, increase physical activity, and especially work with people who tend to be underserved. So the description Tanya gave to me was right up my alley, and it's been extremely enlightening and just really interesting to see what we had thought would be really helpful and necessary, and then get the feedback for what the women who are at these shelters really do want, and how that we shift kind of our um, the way we deliver our intervention each time, adjusts slightly because of the feedback we get from people, which is lovely.
Thank you. Now, so you had two sites, right? Can you tell us more about the differences and similarities, of those two sites and the women who actually participated in those sites?
Sure. So they were very different sites. So the first site is a facility that is an emergency shelter. And it's a small house in downtown Harrisburg. And so there's a lot of interesting factors that go into providing services in that type of environment. First of all, it's a 30-day shelter. They take women and children. And like I said, it's a small house and they really try to maximize the space. So the kitchen / living room is a very small space. So we would have, and they had this huge long table in the middle of it with several refrigerators lined up. And so providing services and educating on exercise got to be really interesting to work
Creative.
around the space.
I would definitely say
Uh,
creative, different kind of
Creative, yeah.
flexible than what we were used to.
Which was such a great experience for our students delivering the education because they really had to problem solve on the spot and figure out how to modify the interventions and the discussion on the spot and figure it out. So we would have lots of conversations about planning. Okay, how is this going to look differently? And then the other location is a longer term shelter, and it's supported by a church mission and has a lot of resources, and it's a big brand new building. And they have a room that we could use, and there was a lot of space. And many of the women there were participating in a year-long drug and alcohol rehab program. So they were there. It was a requirement. So attendance was a lot different in the two facilities. Space was a lot different. Their needs were very different. And I think that that's a really important thing to understand is, you know, just like anything with our patients, one size does not fit all, and you really need to adapt to that environment. What else am I missing, Lori?
I will just say it was extremely exciting to see how the two different sites were different, but then how similar they were in their asks from us when we solicited the what can we do to improve this the next time we run it. So it was really very exciting to see the differences, but then again the same kind of asks they're having out of people coming in to provide care.
So my follow-up questions would be, I know it takes a while, right, for us to develop habits and really for the education to stick. And 30 days is, kind of short, right? So I guess that kind of like answers my question from what you shared, because one of the facilities is like a 30-day facility, right? And so it's very hard, if at all possible, to actually have a follow-up longer than that. Now, it did not really show, but were the participants, who tended to follow up more on the long-term faith-based facility because of that?
So our long-term facility, we would allow the participants to come back and participate in it again when we came back. So we did have a lot of people that wanted to participate again, and we did see some of those changes. Like they had a exercise facility on campus, so that we would hear that they were using the facility, or I'm still walking, or I'm still using my Fitbit. And so there was some really good follow-up there. And unfortunately, follow-up at the emergency shelter wasn't possible because those women would leave, and we wouldn't see them again. Although we did have a few that we caught that came back to the shelter. So we did get some feedback of like things that they recalled, but it was a very small, number of those individuals that came back to the shelter. Happened to be a time that we were there again.
Got it.
So, Maria, really cool anecdote that we had, especially at that second shelter, the emergency shelter. We had obviously we want people to move on from the shelter, so it was a little bittersweet for us. We wanted them in our research as long as possible, but we also wanted them to move on. So we did hear from a few who moved on that asked if they could come back, specifically the days that we were there. So that was really exciting for us to hear. We also learned from the first time we went through this to the follow-up times. After each session, we did have a feedback form from each session. So even if we didn't retain somebody for the whole 30 days, we at least got their feedback on what we can do better next time after each session. So we learned a little bit to be able to be reflective of it's an emergency shelter and people move on.
Yes, actually, that was one of my questions as well. Like, what were your favorite, I guess, sharing realizations was there a eureka moment, right? During the whole experience? I'm sure there's a lot for them because all of the information are new. But for you who've been doing it for a while, was there a moment where, oh, this is kind of like life changing for me, or this is actually something that, like has always been like right in front of me, but I actually never realized it. Um, any of you or both of you, but I would love to hear from both of you for
Hey,
that.
Lori, you're smiling, so do you want to go?
Yes, I have taught a plethora of exercise and fitness and wellness. So many different communities, locations, you name it. It was very different to be invited into somebody's home, working within the rest of their life happening at the same time. And just how much they appreciated it. They really, I mean, it was the most thanks I had received from teaching any of the fitness and wellness classes that I've taught. So I left really feeling very empowered to look at it from our end. I felt like I was doing something that was requested, that was asked for, and that people truly cared for. So I was always very excited when it was our time to go to the shelter, and I always left just feeling really good about what I had done and how we can keep doing this to really actually make an impact. So
What I hear is, it was very patient. I mean, it's not patient, but people centered.
I think one of the things for me was one of our second to last cohorts, and why we actually did a little bit of a modification on our last intervention. As we said, we used the feedback to kind of modify the education. We had a section on core strength and body weighted exercises, and the conversation evolved a little bit into pelvic health and talking about pelvic health. And it it was great to see so many women were so interested and really had a lot of questions. And I think that, you know, it's not that we forget, because I know, being in home health and hospice, how disconnected sometimes the health systems are. But we had the opportunity to really, I think, make a great impact, because we were able to give resources to the women then about where to access pelvic health and how to connect it with within the local community. And there was such a need for pelvic health services once we started talking to the women, and it was across, of course, all generations. So just realizing the impact that physical therapy in particular can make with all populations, and that we really need to help connect the dots for people, because there's such a disconnect of how to access care and what resources are really available. So it was really great too, from a student perspective, for them to learn to understand how taking those few moments and connecting the dots for people and giving them the resources can really make an impactful change in individuals' lives. And I know of at least two of the individuals we talked to did actually reach out and get into an evaluation for pelvic health. So, just that next, getting people into the healthcare system and the resources they need through a wellness program, I thought was a really impactful experience, and a great learning experience too for our students.
Oh, I love hearing that. I've been practicing for over 20 something years. So I'm dating myself, but it's only been in the last, and I've, practiced some of like pelvic health, but it wasn't really until like the last 2 years that I've really, really, like taken courses, incorporated it fully in my practice. So I have to say it kind of like rejuvenated my practice, looking at it from like really a wider lens, and not realizing how, people think a lot of these pelvic health issues are normal because you've aged, normal because you just had a child. And, like my favorite kind of like quote now is, they're common but not normal. Okay, all these pelvic issues that you're experiencing, okay, a lot of people are, but you don't have to suffer through it, because I'm so happy that we can empower them actually to do something about it. So walk us through your hour-long session. I looked at, like the program, there's like, for lack of better term, like the didactic part, kind of like the education piece of it. And then you had your actual activity. So how long did you actually spend on like the actual physical activities? and actually doing it with them, versus the, talking about mental health, about all that, mindfulness, all that topic that's leading to your actual physical activity session?
Yeah, so the sessions we would come in first into the shelters and we would do, they had binders with our lesson plans. So we would first do a check-in. How are you feeling? How's your mood? What were your steps from the last time we came in? So we would have that check-in first. It was about 5 to 10 minutes, depending how many people were at the shelters and how engaged they were. From there, it was about 15 to 20 minutes to go through our lesson for the day. The lesson included just a little bit of background, some examples, some ideas, and then of course that discussion and incorporation was a big part. So yeah, how can you see this working well with you? What barriers do you see to implementing the lesson topic for that week? And we would have that nice discussion piece. From there, we would go into the physical activity session. We did our best to link the physical activity to the topic that
It's actually really good. Yeah, I saw
yeah.
that.
So when we taught, about mindfulness, we then did the mindfulness activity. Sometimes it was a little bit of a stretch. So we had a lot of nutrition asks. So when we would talk about nutrition, sometimes we'd have to pair that with something, a different type of physical activity. But same thing, we made sure everybody in the physical activity session was warmed up, had their space, understood what we were about to do, were wearing either the correct footwear or understood what that meant. And then we would again we'd go through the physical activity and then talk about how could you incorporate this throughout the week. What does your life, day, work look like that we can make this a part, something sustainable, not just a one-off when we're here. So there really was a lot of conversation, not just, hey, here's the lesson.
And I think that that was one of the important things with the education, that we really tried to say, you know, meet everybody where they were at in their life, and say physical activity in any form is good for you. So let's how do we fit it in? It doesn't have to be, if you can't fit in a 45-minute or an hour session, and you can't do all these exercises together, but you are getting up in the morning and you can do these two exercises, these two body weighted exercises. That's adding to your life and adding to your physical activity. We talked a lot about how to incorporate physical activity with caregiving, and having your children with you, carrying your baby up the stairs, or, utilizing the laundry basket as a weighted activity to do bicep curls. We really tried to show people that all that adds up, and it doesn't have to be this big project that you have to fit into your life, because these women are already, many of them are working two jobs and caring for kids and trying to find a new place to live. They've got a lot on their plate. So just showing them how just those little things can make a difference and empower them with that. So we really try to take, here's the next exercise time, but know that these can fit in anywhere.
Were
I
there
love
like particular
that.
exercises that they love?
Oh, you took it right out of my mouth. The dance one was hilarious.
Okay.
We had a hoot. I think we had the most people there that day, plus their kids got involved. So they were flossing, they were doing like, all the kid dance moves. We were trying to do other dance moves that, used a little music that us older crowd, right? That we were trying to engage the participants with, but the kids came in and just stole the show. So it was a really fun. I think that day we went a little bit longer than we should have, just because we were having so much fun and the kids got involved, and that really was a big part of it, to show that you don't have to do this just on your own to put on music and dance, that you really could make it. This was at the emergency shelter, so it became almost like a house party of just everyone dancing and moving and doing what they could to get engaged. So that one was an absolute blast.
It really was a house party at the smaller shelter, because there was a lot of bodies in that very small space. And so it became really, truly much of a dance party. And the shelter staff actually came out and got into the party too. So we had everybody there. Everybody was having fun participating that day.
I think I could very well relate to that. I do a lot of that, especially in the winter, like with my kids, and also much more so in a clinic, so we actually have our karaoke Fridays where, if some people actually want to dance to that. We actually have them do that. And I think I actually really like that we're taking away from just the usual exercises to focusing more on activities. You know, like it doesn't always have to be the bike, right? It doesn't always have to be the running or walking. I'm like, what if you don't like it?
So
Right?
Maria, one of the things we talked a lot about was like how do you incorporate in the activities you're already doing. So when we were at the shelters, it was usually dinner time. So especially with the dancing, one of the things we talked about was, can you put on music and dance while you're cooking? So just different ways to kind of move around or be more physically active in what you're already doing. We did that with the body weight exercises as well. Can we do toe raises while we're waiting for the water to boil? And just figuring out ways to kind of add them in rather than just in a paused state.
So like I just realized, like I said earlier, we actually just from the CSM presented on yellow flags, and come to think of it, your intervention actually really addressed all of what we're talking about, because that talking part also helps them, walk through their stresses, their mental load, right? And then relating that with how physical activity to some extent as well can actually help like ease that. Love it. So, so during the, like the process of empowerment, what were most pronounced in the participants? When you think about, say, self-efficacy versus the community support, what do you think was most pronounced in the participants, and how can we basically like further nurture these, these supports that they actually
I think that the self-efficacy was really important. We went back and forth with with a pedometer and counting steps, and because we really wanted to make the program something that was really cost effective. Our ultimate goal is to find a way to train the trainer for shelter staff, and to be able to have this an ongoing program that shelter staff members run. That's kind of our big pie in the sky dream, is to be able to figure out how to get the resources to do that training program. So we really wanted to look at the costs associated with the program. And so, we went back and forth, and we found inexpensive pedometer with monitors. Uh, and we talked about, do we really need those? Don't we need them? What role do they play? And I think the feedback that the women got from wearing those watches, first of all, they were so excited about getting something like that. We got some comments of that. I never thought I could get one of these, or I didn't know how to purchase one, or, so they really did like having that. Just they would talk about, I did this many steps, I can't believe I moved this much. And so just that awareness of what they were doing, and that that self-efficacy around, I'm already doing good things for myself, I think was really empowering. And the Fitbit did play a role in that. So you know uh, going back and forth about utilizing the more costly, and it was only, I think we stayed under $25 for our Fitbits, um but still, like, balancing that.
I also read though, like there's a lot of them who, like eventually did not get to wear it, lost it. Those are, I mean, and I'm thinking, well, if you're losing it within 30 days, right? Is it
Mhm.
something that, and I guess the nature of them being so transient, right? Not having
Mhm.
their own space. Because I'm reading like why I actually have, so I did like remote, we were one of the first ones from APHPT, Applied Prevention and Health Promotion Therapy. So I actually did kind of like remote therapeutic monitoring in 2020 during COVID. So I'm still wearing the Garmin watch. I actually didn't have to change it until it broke on me. So, which was really a challenge. I'm wearing it like 24/7. So I totally get, what they feel about having to self-monitor, right? But that's the thing too, is that, I'm reflecting on it. And I'm like, yeah, not having your own space. And it's the least of my worries, right?
Mhm.
To have somebody to take care of, not that watch. So
Yeah.
anyway, I guess my follow-up question would then be like, what barriers or challenges did the participants face in applying the empowerment gained from the program, like to their everyday lives? And how can future programs help bridge those gaps?
Something we see very commonly in any exercise intervention is perceived time as a barrier. So that is something we focused, it's one of the reasons why we focused so much on how do you integrate this into what you're already doing, and not this is one more thing you need to do. So the same idea, that perceived time barrier, did still persist, but we really did try to focus a lot into just that integrative measure. So, and again, anecdotally, those who have been in the program a couple of sessions now, when we bring up the things, they're like, oh yeah, I remember that, or oh yeah, I did that, or I completely forgot we could do it this way. So that's just a testament to that constant reinforcement of the more times you can explain or help somebody really figure out how to tie these pieces, these empowered pieces, into their life, the more chance they have to resiliency and to make those pieces truly stick.
And I think with your point around the Fitbit and losing and not having it, that is one of the barriers. There's a lot of variability in their lives at that point in time. They do not have a maybe their own space. They might be sharing space, keeping track of all the things, plus keeping track of all the things if they have their children with them. So I think if you're planning a program like that, you have to plan for replacement of those items, and also to not make it a negative, because if you have a negative, where you have to sign that you're going to keep it, or that's why we didn't actually make it a requirement that they had to report their steps, because we didn't want that to be a barrier to showing up. Again, meeting people where they're at. We made the assumption that any engagement was better than no engagement, and we didn't want losing a watch or feeling bad about losing it, or losing your book, or not being able to make one of the sessions be a barrier to coming the next time. So really thinking about that and how you communicate that is, I think, really important. So we did, if they lost them, we replaced them. We didn't ask, where, how it got lost or stolen or whatever. We just said, that's okay, here's another one. So planning that into your budgeting too is really important, because we did have people that we replaced multiple Fitbits with, but then we also had people that, you know, especially in the shelter where they participated multiple times, we had people that still had their same watch on and had been tracking the whole time, and really committed to it. So you have both sides of it. So I think, just like anybody, in any life, like, you have people that misplace their watch or doesn't stick with it, and then other people, like you said yourself, that has worn it forever.
What do you think are the factors that you've observed, in the women who kind of like did stick to either the program or their Fitbit, versus those who either lost it multiple times, or maybe who just showed up more sporadically within that 4-week period? What do you think were like the contributing factors, if any?
I'm not sure if there's a single factor. It truly was the gambit of, they lost the charger, they had one of the older versions that didn't work with the newer versions of chargers. That's the whole, issue of using new technologies and changing technologies. Some had kids took it, ran off with it. Some didn't. They just lost it in the gambit of being in a transient environment. So I don't know if I could pinpoint one thing.
Okay.
Yeah, no, and I mean, some other ones lost it at work, and had it damaged at work, those types of things. Yeah, it really, there's so much variability in the participant.
So, okay, kind of winding down, so how do you think can your study's findings be used to advocate for hopefully a larger scale, systemic changes that addresses the root causes of, say, residence insecurity for two women in particular, because those are your study subjects?
So one of the pieces I would definitely like to get in here in the podcast for all to know is the how do you get into the shelters? How do you actually engage with the population? It's trust. What the shelters have told us when we went and pitched the ideas is people come pitch ideas all the time. They come in, they leave, we never see them again. And that is a huge issue. So if you're interested in this type of work and engaging with the population, you really have to engage with the population, show up on time, show up no matter what, show up no matter what the weather. You truly have to give. You have to give what you've said that you would give, and you cannot make false promises. So that's why, Tonya's idea of that train the trainer program, that's what we have said to the shelters. We want to be able to figure out how we can find the resources to be able to train shelter staff to deliver Empower, so that Empower can continue regardless of when we're there or not. So really, it's building that trust, really having to show up with the shelters and with the participants at the shelter and have that legacy planning in place so shelters aren't just, oh, that was great, we're never going to see them again. So really keeping that connection open and having touch points, knowing if shelters say, hey, we don't have time for this program at this time, doing that follow-up. Hey, we had reached out, at X time, you had said not at this time, how's it looking now? So that is truly how you build and get into these types of populations that encourage shelters to then invest in other projects as well. So that was the biggest takeaway we had from working in the shelters and the feedback we had from shelter staff.
I think to add to that, Lori, on the flip side, you have to have persistence and focus, because on the flip side of that, we had turnover in shelter staff. We had the shelter forgetting we were coming. They started a new shelter coordinator and they didn't know anything about why our program was there. And you'd show up and everybody was out doing something else, or they forgot to tell everybody that they were coming, or they shifted dinner that day and they were in the middle of making dinner and we were showing up. So really being you having to be flexible with your approach. And I think, my background is in home health and hospice. So I spent my entire career being flexible, walking into people's homes. So realizing that, and that you're going into someone's home, that's where they are residing at that time. That's their residence. So, thinking about everything else, all the other factors in their lives. So if you're going to do this type of research, being persistent and consistent is so important, and just going with the flow of, they're not always going to deliver what you need from them. And you have to be flexible with your research and your study and your intervention to meet them where they're at, and just keep at that. Because if you get stuck by those frustrations, you won't continue with the project, because it's going to happen. I think we've had every variability of change of time and staff turnover and, and having to re-educate new leadership and working, with the shelters to keep the program going, and reminding them that we're coming and why we're coming. And so just it's really a game of persistence and consistency to implement these types of programs.
So 3 words that I heard over and over: persistence, consistency, and flexibility.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. Just very much kind of like, how physical therapy is really, right? So one last question. So when you ended the program, I know, Tanya, you said this has been an ongoing program, right? Even before you formally did the study. So is it still ongoing? Like, right, how has it kind of like did it evolve? Because of your study and your findings, are they still doing it? Are students still doing it? Or is the staff at this point taken over? Kind of like, just how did you lead them and how they are like at this point?
So a couple of things happen simultaneously. The program is on pause right now, but our goal is to reinitiate it. So leadership changed at both of the shelters. So there was a disconnect, and they wanted to pause because there was a leadership change and they were trying to get their feet and their bearings. At the same time, both Lori and I changed institutions, and we were in developing programs that are both hybrid in fashion. So building our student base locally so that we have students that can go to those shelters is one of the areas of challenge. And we're continuing to look for funding to do the Train the Trainer program. So our goal right now is to look for grant funding to be able to develop a Train the Trainer program for the shelters. And kind of our big pie in the sky goal, is to be able to then implement that on a larger scale for many more shelters. So really, the lasting effect of this is not as a student program, because that's hard to maintain. The lasting effect of this is to really have a standardized program that shelters can take and utilize with their teams and implement.
And the way
That's
we have integrated students in this pause period is in developing that train the trainer program. We've reached out to other programs at our university to involve students in how we actually build that. So from the IT side and the computer science side, how is this all going to end up looking so that we can deliver the program in a train the trainer aspect. So that is a place where we've still been able to get students involved, just not necessarily with the program delivery in the current way that it looks. So that helps us to hopefully advance to that pie in the sky goal.
Well, thank you so much, Lori and Tonya. It was such a nice conversation. And can you just please share where could our audience reach you? Just just in case you have any questions, ideas.
So I can be reached at tmiller2, that's the number 2, at harrisburgu.edu.
And Lori?
And I'm L. Portzer at harrisburgu.edu.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much. And
Thank you.
we get to discuss part 2 of this at some point in time when it's trainer, at that point.